Hey, GrowWire listeners, this is Kendall Fisher. I've been on with you a few times now, but you might know me better as the host of The GrowWire Show. Anyway, I've got some exciting stuff for you on this episode of The GrowWire podcast, like introducing our new host, Editor-in-Chief of GrowWire, Fritz Nelson. Hey, Fritz, so excited to have you.
Hey, Kendall, good to be here. I heard that there was a firing that led to this, Jason is no longer...
Okay, that is not the truth. I did not fire Jason Maynard, who is my boss, but we did have a couple discussions. And, you know, Fritz, you came on, in September?
Yes.
And we decided you've got the face for radio.
Oh, gee, thanks.
I'm kidding.
I was wondering how the conversation with Jason went. Was it one of those, it's not you, it's us, it's me?
I just straight up went for the jugular and said, it's actually you, Jason. So, sorry.
Was there at least a performance improvement plan or?
No. Jason obviously has a lot on his plate, and with you taking over as editor-in-chief and your history, which we're going to get into later, we just figured, Fritz is going to be really good at this, and we're excited to hear, kind of how you go about your interviews with all of your experience that you've had in content creation in the past. So actually, I guess that's a good place to start right now. Typically on these episodes of the GrowWire podcast, which now you've listened to quite a bit, we like to start off by helping our audience get to know our guest a little bit better. And today, you're technically the guest. So that means, dun, 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 you have to sit in the hot seat. Do you think you can handle it?
As long as I don't have to shave my head like Jason, I'll be okay.
Shave your head? Well, you got the beard part, so that's good. But no, there will be no shaving of heads.
Thank goodness.
Okay, so actually, let's start off. Can you take us through your career path leading up to this point of becoming the editor-in-chief of GrowWire?
Probably it's a little dangerous to say, but I actually started out with a degree in journalism, actual journalism. I feel like that's not a popular thing anymore, but I still
also
love it.
have a degree in journalism.
See, okay, so it's still popular. But I studied media in its various forms, and I actually dove into the deep end, running publications that were very technical. One of the first ones I got my start with was called Network Computing, and we actually reviewed the products that kind of run the networks of our enterprise organizations and even the internet as it exists today. And I ran a publication called Information Week and kind of went a little bit more on the business and technology end of things. And then before I came here to NetSuite, I worked for a publication called Tom's Hardware, which was really for people who built PCs for gaming and other purposes, and so got deep into the technology of how CPUs worked and how graphics processing worked and all the parts. Built my own PCs, and so that was kind of my career was always steeped in deep in the technology.
For those of you who have been on GrowWire or work for NetSuite or Oracle, GrowWire is powered by NetSuite, and you are actually running kind of all of content across both GrowWire and Oracle NetSuite.
Yes, so I've had to kind of get immersed in all of the things that NetSuite does, but my favorite part of the job is GrowWire.
What made you want to join us as our fearless leader?
After spending, a lot of time, I don't want to say how many decades in traditional media, one of the things that became clear, media is a very challenged sport these days. A lot of media companies struggle to make money. A lot of media companies are being what you might call disintermediated by companies like NetSuite, but by also individual bloggers, YouTube, social media. And it just seemed like what we want to do here with GrowWire is to create a platform that's really just about storytelling. We don't sit here and try to figure out what the search engine gods want us to write about. We write about companies that are growing, and we get underneath the covers of that growth strategy. And that seemed to be, for me at least, an appealing new way to tell stories and uncover what's happening in the world of business.
Well, I love that, because that's certainly what we're doing here now. You've been here a few months now, so you're definitely in it. You're in the weeds with us at this point, and you're not going anywhere. Sorry, we're keeping you.
Good. I like it here.
So what are you looking forward to most with GrowWire?
The aspect of finding stories. I always believe that there are stories all around us, and we know that. All of us know that innately, but even some of the most seemingly on the surface boring things, if you scratch beneath the surface, there's always a story. There's always a struggle to get even a modest amount of success. And uncovering that, to me, is one of the most fascinating things to do, whether the end goal is writing about it, talking about it on a podcast, or getting somebody to tell us on a podcast. But those are the things that really drive me. And in my short time here, I've had a chance to do a little bit of that, and I look forward to doing more of it.
Do you have any stories on GrowWire right now, whether it be a video or a podcast or an article that you just fell in love with already?
Sure. I mean, I think you're kind of fishing for me to talk about all the wonderful GrowWire video stories that you tell.
No, not at all.
But those are certainly some of my favorite. The piece that you did on Alex's lemonade stand was very touching. We have a piece on Toad & Co., which touched my heart. I actually happened to be watching that before we published it in a room with you, and I had to kind of turn it off because it was really kind of one of those tear-jerking things. Yeah, all of those stories have been great, and we've got a lot in the pipeline that I think are going to be exciting as well.
Yes, we're all really, really looking forward to it, and looking forward to all the stories that you're going to bring on as well with your history and your network. But business aside, what's something that Fritz Nelson likes to do outside of work?
Well, sleep. No, I'm kidding. One of my hobbies is I play a lot of basketball. I play in some men's leagues, and I play all around the Southern California area. As I get older, it gets more painful to do, but I still love it. So that's one of the things. I read a lot of books, a lot of fiction, and those are my two main hobbies, I would say.
Wait, I think you're leaving something out, because a little birdie also told me that you love coffee. Can you tell us a little bit more about that obsession? Are you a coffee connoisseur, if you will?
Yeah, I don't know if that's the right term for it. I mean, other people have worse terms for it. I would like to call myself a coffee enthusiast.
Okay, I'm here for that.
Yeah, I mean, I always thought that I was really knowledgeable about coffee and really had all the devices and contraptions to make it the best possible ways. And then when actually earlier this summer, or last summer, I guess, I kind of threw myself into the world of coffee even more. I started going, there are actually events like coffee festivals. So I started attending those and realizing that there are people way more obsessed than I was. But of course, it spurred me to be even more obsessed with it, and kind of perfect the craft of everything from choosing the right coffee to buy, to how to grind it, how to brew it properly, and even kind of developing my taste buds around coffee. It's a lot like wine and beer in the sense that it grows in the ground, and there are different varieties, and you can taste different things in what you drink. So it can become a real obsession, almost in a negative way, I guess, if you throw yourself into it too much. But I've tried to balance the regular life with my coffee life.
Got it. Well, I'm expecting then we'll have some coffee stories coming up
I hope so.
Here on
I hope so.
GrowWire.
Yes, working on it actually.
Now, I don't want to make people go to this, but I found, as a millennial, I do a lot of research before someone new comes into my life. Boyfriends, friends, colleagues, new bosses. And I happened to find a YouTube video of you doing stand-up. I'm not going to tell everybody how to go find it, but I did see it. So you're also pretty funny. It's very obvious in that video. Go search Fritz Nelson on YouTube and you'll find it. Anyway, can we end things here by you telling us one of your favorite jokes?
Well, I'm actually a horrible joke teller, or I think I'm a horrible joke teller. My dad is a really bad joke teller, and so I just figure I'm not going to try to. Far. Yeah, I tend to find things funny that are. I don't know. I do have one of those senses of humor where I make fun of people a lot, myself as well. But for example, I find a lot of corporate speak funny. How far people go out of their way to use words like leverage and streamline, and I don't know. There are tons of words. I think I sent you a text the other day with a phrase that I read, and I felt like I lost a year of my life reading that sentence.
Yes, you did.
But I think that I find people who take themselves too seriously funny, and so I just find moments. And I find also that the more I immerse myself in a topic, the more I find that's funny about it. And I think that's just simply because whether you're talking about coffee or business or technology or really anything, the deeper you get into it, the more seriously people take themselves, and that just is, I don't know, open season for mockery, I suppose. I'm going to try not to mock too many people, but I do like to kind of point out the obvious humor in situations.
Well, we are looking forward to that. I can't wait to see how you bring that out. Actually, I was in with you on a couple of your podcasts, and you definitely brought it out. So GrowWire listeners, make sure you tune in for that, because I was chuckling quite a bit. Thank you so much, Fritz. We look forward to hearing you officially take over the GrowWire podcast here in the next few weeks. And Jason, if you're listening, don't worry. You'll always have a seat here at the GrowWire studio ready for you whenever you want. Right, Fritz?
Exactly. Once you're done with your performance improvement plan.
Thank you so much, Fritz. All right, on this episode of the GrowWire podcast, Jason Maynard sat down with Jodan Posell, the co-founder and managing partner at Full Stack Finance, as well as the former leader of companies like eToys, GameFly, and BeachMint. In fact, Jodan worked with 10 companies over 20 years, mostly startups, and a lot of which were focused on direct-to-consumer, subscription-based, or service models. He started Full Stack in 2015 after realizing how the model could work in the B2B world with finance, accounting, and HR. Find out what he's learned in all his years working for or founding startups, as well as his advice for entrepreneurs on managing cash flow and layering your growth strategy so you don't get ahead of yourself to keep the ball rolling in a rational and profitable way. It's all coming up next.
You're listening to the GrowWire podcast, a place where you'll learn the ins and outs of growing a business, running a business, or even taking your big idea, career, or personal development to the next level. It's all possible. Our host, Jason Maynard, the SVP of Marketing at Oracle NetSuite and the editor-in-chief of GrowWire.com, will take you on an exploration of growth through candid conversations with some of the most brilliant minds in entrepreneurship, entertainment, business development, and more. Whatever your goal, we know you'll walk away with the right tools to help fuel your own journey of growth.
All right, welcome to the GrowWire podcast. With me in the studio today is the co-managing partner of Full Stack Finance, Jodan Posell. Jodan, thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having me, Jason.
So Jodan and I go back 20-something years, the mean streets of the Santa Monica startup scene. And Jordan's been through a roller coaster of amazing experiences up and down in the startup world. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the hits and some of the misses and what he's up to now. But Jordan, maybe talk a little bit how'd you end up in LA and breaking into the kind of the tech and finance world?
I was living in London, working for a company called Gemstar that News Corp had purchased in the video recording technology space. And a friend of mine, a very good friend of mine, had invested in a directory business in LA for the film and entertainment space, film and TV space. And they were taking these very big, thick directories of everyone in the entertainment world, directors, editors, producers, and putting them online.
Okay.
And needed someone to come in and basically act as general manager and help run that. So I moved here. 1995, we raised $1 million, spent it all on making this incredible IMDb Pro type product, walked into our first big customer pitch meeting at CAA and found out that not a single computer there was really connected to the internet. And so that business went away. But I stayed and had always wanted to be in the internet and was watching it kind of from afar in London. Everyone I talked to there said, "Why are you here? You know, you sound American." I would go back to California, and I did, and entered the internet in 1995 and basically never came out.
Yeah, and you had some interesting early days in the internet, but I think one of the companies that it might be a little infamous, if you will, from some of the early days of the internet, but it was on to some interesting things at the start, was eToys. Maybe talk a little bit about how you got involved with eToys and sort of some of the experiences seeing one of the first .com.
Yeah, after the directory company, I actually got a job at Idealab, and Idealab's still around, but at the time it was, bigger and even more prominent than it is today.
Yeah.
And
some amazing inventions came out of there.
Amazing inventions and a lot of brain power, a lot of great people, a lot of great companies. And one of the investments, or one of the incubated companies, was eToys at the time, and a lot of people forget that Idealab helped start that. Yeah. And the eToys guys came to me and said, "We need a finance person." And they described, I remember them pulling me into a room and saying, "Here are the things we need in that finance person." And I thought to myself, it sounds a lot like me. This sounds super exciting. And I transitioned from Idealab to eToys, which was quite common at that time to go to the portfolio companies. And that was 1997, and things were really starting to change. And NetSuite was going public shortly thereafter, and Amazon was going public. A lot of companies were going very quickly from inception to IPO at multi-billion-dollar valuations. And so I came into a company that was using, I think, Peachtree or Mind Your Own Business to run a rapidly growing e-commerce business, and we took it and basically hired, I think, about 50 temps to just manually input all of the accounting data, get something that we could put in an S1 with Ernst & Young's help and a lot of lawyers. People were working 100, 120-hour weeks. We were doing their laundry. We were, I would come home, my own dog would bark at me because I was a stranger, a prowler. And we got the S1 done. We went public, $8 billion market cap. People walking around in a daze in the hallways with calculators in their hand.
Did it hit $8 billion?
$8 billion market cap.
That's banana. I didn't even realize
crazy.
It was that high. I mean, even it's funny because people talk about like a tech bubble today, and the stuff that was going on back in 99, 2000. I mean, looks like it dwarfs even some of the craziness that's out there today.
And we, that happened in, I think, May, and
it's May 99, right?
99.
Yeah.
By January of 2000, we had not hit our Q4 goal. 75% of our business was Q4, obviously toys.
Yeah.
And stock plummeted from about 86 to, I think, 14. I can't remember exactly, but clearly a slight decrease in market cap.
Yeah. What's it like being in a company when you go public that quick and the company's worth so much? Like what are people thinking inside of the shop?
The hardest part is keeping everyone focused on their job and not on the stock price.
Yeah.
The stock price. And, you have young engineers just coming out of Caltech or college or what have you who are all of a sudden worth millions of dollars, and they're 21 years old. And those guys and girls are not very focused on their day jobs. When
People spent a lot of the money that they had on paper, or they made plans about what they were going to do.
Yeah, a lot of lockups. So luckily that avoided some of that.
Yeah.
Certainly the finance group, very locked up for a long time.
So from you've spent a lot of time in the finance operations doing sort of the what I would call the business model architecting for these companies. For those who maybe weren't around when the eToys was kicking up in some of the early internet, what was it like to sort of construct that business model? And how do you make sense of sort of, okay, we're going to sell somebody else's products online and that whole retail model?
Well, at the time, you didn't have what you have today, which is the huge elephant in the room of Amazon.
Yeah.
And we did have Amazon, but they were selling books.
Yeah. They were in it just like you.
And they were rumored to go into things like toys, but they weren't doing it yet. So we had a very clear goal, which was to be the best children's store online in the world. And the Toys R Us offline experience was very bad at the time, faulty in a lot of ways. And so we figured out a way through great product management and incredible technology, we felt at the time, to be the best experience. And I think if you talk to people who were buying toys online at the time, we succeeded in that. What we didn't succeed in was hitting sales goals that would produce enough gross margin to pay to break even, to pay for the OpEx, which was huge, right? You couldn't just go onto Shopify and launch a site anymore. You needed a $5 million data room, and you needed a lot of people.
The differences from back then to today in terms of the cost to actually get an operation up and running are just insane.
Literally $2 to $5 million data rooms, and there was no Amazon Web Services. There was no Shopify. You built your own e-commerce servers.
Yep.
And so, and we knew that we needed to raise more money. That was always going to be clear. But when we started to really miss by a lot our sales targets, that money dried up, and then of course the whole .com bust dried up even further, and that was the end. Yeah. Amazon could have easily gone the same way, except that they had raised a secondary, I think $90 or $100 million of secondary. Fact check that. Earlier, basically a year earlier. Otherwise, they would have been out of money too, and we'd be living in a very different e-commerce world right now.
So you've been in the early stages of a lot of these new business models. I mean, eToys was one. I want to talk a little bit about GameFly, because that was one of the early, again, sort of subscription, direct-to-consumer style companies, kind of changing the way that people consume, in this case, video games.
Right.
And talk about your experience there, because I think it's interesting how that model today you're seeing in whether it's cars or, shaving products or whatever it is you're seeing.
Right. GameFly was very interesting in a few respects. Netflix was out there with sending discs at the time, no streaming. And so it gave us a bit of a roadmap to understand, and they went public. So we had their S1s, we had their Ks, their Qs, and we could understand a lot about their cost structures and their churn and how they did their accounting and finances. So that was very helpful, and they paved the way. They also were pretty clear in not necessarily analyst calls, but conversations that we would hear about, that they were not going to games for a while. So we had a good free run at it for some time. But people didn't know really that much about subscription businesses online, and so we had to make up a lot of the modeling, financial modeling. We had to make up some of the accounting on how to treat certain costs and certain items that just hadn't been done. And I had the pleasure of working with Toby Lenk, who was the CEO of eToys, who was the first CEO of GameFly. A lot of people don't know he was the founding CEO of GameFly. And super smart guy. We would sit together and really hash out how many discs people, how long people would
hold the
remain
disc.
Members for. How long would they hold discs for? How many would we lose, get stolen? There's a lot of assumptions and a lot of things in subscription accounting now lifetime value that at the time were not common knowledge. You couldn't do an LTV search in Google and get millions of results like you can today from top VCs and top CFOs and top CEOs.
Yeah.
So a lot of it was making assumptions and tweaking and revising, and but to understand the subscription economics and unit economics and customer economics, is invaluable to being a CFO today of many businesses, subscription or not.
Yeah, it's funny because I think if you look at a lot of the startups today, I think in most cases they, like you mentioned, they have that body of work that they can reference. They can go online and they can read VC posts or tech vendors. It's kind of laid out, and obviously with the filings and on you can go look at successful companies, what they've done. The thing, and I'm curious your perspective on it, because I see this today with, I would argue, more mature companies who are trying to add, I don't even want to call it a subscription, but sort of a as a service or a different consumption mode for their products, because sometimes they'll sell based on a one-time usage or an outcome. How do you organize your business when you're selling things as a service or by the drink or whatever, maybe it's not a pure subscription versus selling it when you're a product company? Because it's the accounting changes, but you also have to think about like renewals, and you have to think about how do we build an upsell cross-sell mechanism into our model, right? There's a whole bunch of organizational things of people doing different.
Interestingly, we've all been there. Amazon, you go and try to buy something and it says, I'll give you recurring delivery of this every month or every 2 months. And they push it hard, and I don't know about you, but I hate it. I don't want most of this stuff on that basis.
I got a lot of like travel toothpaste in my house,
right?
Because
and
of
I have
that.
20 printer cartridges sitting in my home office.
Yeah.
So I think you have to think about first: does the customer even want a recurring relationship in this space? And I think. I worked at a company called BeachMint, and that was, we've launched six different verticals that were all subscription based. Some of them may not have been a good idea or something that customers wanted on a recurring basis.
Maybe give a little color on what BeachMint was trying to do, because BeachMint was 5-6 years ago.
BeachMint was
hottest thing.
Sure, and it was a great company, and it was basically a celebrity-led, celebrity-created products subscription service. So, Jessica Simpson would create a set of skincare products that you would then get on a subscription basis, or Justin Timberlake and his interior designer would design and create home products, i.e. one of the verticals that I'm not sure you need on a recurring revenue basis, on a recurring basis.
A JT chair or something like that?
Right, exactly. And so, you have to be careful. I guess one of the great blog posts, you talk about the bodies of work you can rely on. Bill Gurley, right when we were doing this, BeachMint wrote, Bill Gurley, the venture capitalist, wrote a blog post about something like the siren song of LTV. And you can put anything into an Excel model, an LTV model, but inputs and outputs are different. And just because you can put something into Excel doesn't make it true.
Yeah.
And a lot of businesses could model out, especially at the time, 2012, 13, could model out great-looking businesses in Excel on subscription basis because the LTV was huge.
Yeah.
And that gave you a lot of money to spend acquiring those customers. Didn't turn out to be true, and there was that whole first wave of BeachMint and Shoe Dazzle and subscription businesses that I think fell some victim to that siren song of LTV. The other thing that we learned at BeachMint was get the first one and the second one right before you launch 6.
Yeah.
And I think anyone in retail will tell you that's, or franchising or restaurants will tell you that's a cardinal rule. Right?
Yeah.
Get the first one right and the second one right before you.
In this case, these were distinct brands, correct?
These were distinct brands: Shoe Mint and Jewel Mint and everything Mint, Home Mint, Intimint. And I think that was one of the we were running too fast.
Interesting.
At some point.
talk a little bit. How did this all play out? When did you guys realize in the cycle that you were moving too fast? Like, what were the signs that you? I mean, did you guys consciously raise enough money?
No, I mean, it's the classic reason that startups go out of business, which is they run out of money.
Yeah.
And we were just spending too much money. We were spending too much money on three things. One, that siren song of LTV, so we were overspending on marketing because we knew we would get it paid back.
So you improved out your customer acquisition.
I could probably do some air quotes around that here. And secondly, we were spending a lot of money on inventory because you didn't know what the demand curve was going to be. And we were obviously running at a great pace and trying to hit it out of the park, so you need to have enough inventory. If you are stocking out, by definition, you're never going to hit your sales numbers. So we would basically overbuy. We didn't know what the steepness of the demand curve would be.
And you were doing that across multiple brands.
Across multiple brands, brand new.
Yeah.
Right. Subscriptions brand new, and the brand is brand new. So we had no history to go on in terms of planning, merchandise planning. And three, running 6 businesses. While you would hope there would be synergies in the technology platform and the marketing and other things, in the early stages there wasn't. So we hired a lot of people to do the same thing across different brands and different verticals. So those 3 things sucked up the money, and we raised $85 million, spent it pretty quickly.
Yeah, and ultimately BeachMint became part of Condé Nast, right?
Merged with part of Condé Nast to create a content plus commerce brand under the Lucky brand, and I think that content plus commerce is still a jury's out
type of approach,
type of theory. Yeah.
What's interesting to me though is, and I see this. You see this a lot in. I think we're obviously here in Santa Monica doing the podcast, but you see a lot of the early subscription models sort of leveraged from what I would call sort of the direct-to-consumer models online, where they took those, infomercial style models and said, okay, can we build something similar? And when you guys were looking at this subscription service, how much attention did you pay to those models? Because there's some wildly, the great businesses in there.
Yeah, BeachMint, we had a great group of people from Guthrie Renker.
So you did have a
great job at that. Who had been at Bertelsmann, if you remember, buy your 7 records for a penny, and you thought you were so clever,
stealing money from them.
Yeah. The Bertelsmann, those Columbia House record clubs were pioneers in the space.
Yeah.
And then the TV, the online or the live TV selling, the Guthrie Renkers, that's all recurring revenue business models that they were doing way before the internet, both of those.
Yeah. It's interesting to see that overplay, and I think you still see brands trying to figure this out, and how do you go direct, and is it celebrity-led, or can you build a model around that?
Right. I think, back to the GameFly experience, the thing that really, GameFly was by all means a success. It tried to go public during a tough time in the markets, and with a lot of skepticism around the physical disc strategy, but that was something more controlled by the game publishers than GameFly itself. But when we launched GameFly, there were probably 5 or 6 similar businesses, and we won for a number of reasons, but the main one I attribute to is access to capital. We had Sequoia come in and basically on the basis of a very brief PowerPoint give us what would now be a seed, then was a Series A. Immediately, months later did the B, and their support got us access to a big working capital line at Silicon Valley Bank. None of the competitors, no one else in the space had access to that kind of capital. That one, we could buy inventory and we could buy customers. No one else could, and they fell away quickly. So I think subscription businesses need to be cognizant that they don't have access to that capital, particularly if you're selling physical goods and you have to buy physical goods and get paid back for them, get paid the acquisition cost and get paid the inventory cost later. You need access to a lot of capital,
especially when you're only taking a fraction of what the, in terms of the revenue, in terms of what the utility of the product is relative to your costs. So yeah. Well, we're gonna take a quick break and then hear about your own entrepreneurial experience coming up next.
Which American company started with a guy in a garage, was featured on Shark Tank, and now has over 1 million customers? Hint, they're reducing crime in neighborhoods everywhere. Here's Ring Video Doorbell founder Jamie Siminoff with his secret to success.
It's true. In just a few years, we've had huge growth. We've hired hundreds of people, expanded our warehouse, and we're shipping millions of units a year, all while making sure our customers are happy. I've had lots of things to worry about, but I never worry about our finance and accounting because we use NetSuite from Oracle. From the beginning, NetSuite let me see what's going on with my business in real time, from revenues to expenses, customers and orders, even HR. I run my business from a dashboard right on my phone. NetSuite has been my business management system from 10 to a team of over 1,000, and NetSuite will be my choice as we continue to innovate and grow.
Go to netsuite.com/ring to see how Jamie scaled his business. You'll also get our free guide titled Overcoming Your 5 Obstacles to Growth. That's netsuite.com/ring for your free guide and the story of a great American company. netsuite.com/ring.
You've been through a bunch of different startup experiences, and you had some wins, you had some losses. Through all that, you decided, you know what, I'm going to go do one myself. So talk a little bit about your idea.
My masochistic tendency.
Yeah, it's like, I applaud you for your entrepreneurial vigor.
Basically, I did 10 different startups.
Was it 10 in total?
10 in total over 20 years.
You should probably write a book.
Yeah, I could. I saw that the evolution of LA and startups here needed a better solution for early stage finance and accounting. So clearly I have an entrepreneurial streak because I did 10 different startups. There was no fear for me in starting one myself. The question really was just, was there enough critical mass here? Was there enough bulk here to run a business that could, a service business doing finance and accounting for startups that could pay my bills? And I'm happy to report 5 years later that the answer is a resounding yes. That there are hundreds of startups in LA that need this. There are hundreds of startups in LA that we support in either finance, accounting, HR, or all of the above. Hopefully we have changed the paradigm somewhat of how businesses start, raise money, and do their finance, accounting, and HR. Yeah. I think, I had this vision that we would be the finance and accounting and HR department outsourced, but it would act the same way at fixed cost, and you would grow with the company as it grew until such time as they needed full-time help. Great. I thought I was brilliant. I went up to the Bay Area in week 2 of starting my business to go pitch some VCs up there at a VC event at the Rosewood. Second person I talked to looked at me like I was talking about inventing air. Like, he said, of course, that's what all of my companies do. I don't let them hire any full-time people till Series B. So I thought I was brilliant in inventing this concept when in fact in Silicon Valley it is and was fairly standard. But hopefully we've had a hand in bringing it to LA because it is a better model. It's much more cost efficient. You're getting startup savvy people. You are avoiding some of the mistakes that I saw founders making, and the biggest of which was that they would try to hire a unicorn. Yeah. They would look for and expect to hire a unicorn. So I want someone who's going to be CFO and be great, nails in my board meetings, manage all my financial models, also do the accounting, close the books, and cut checks and put desks together. Yeah. I want to pay that person $80,000 a year. Yeah. It's you're looking for a unicorn. And so we can give a startup all of those people. We just give them in bits and pieces, and team members, different team members can perform for 2 hours a week, 4 hours a week, 8 hours a week, whatever they need, all of those different tasks, and they don't have to look for the unicorn for 6 months before realizing that we were right in the first place. Yeah, well, and it was interesting too, and I think this is, the LA market is probably similar to other, what I would call sort of newer venture markets. You sort of take the San Francisco Bay Area out of it, where the ecosystems have been in place for 30, 40 years. You've got tons of venture capital, and then you have the service provider pool around it to help those companies grow. You could argue when you get out of the valley, the same infrastructure and support doesn't really exist. Whether maybe a little bit more in Boston, and you see a few venture hubs, but LA's always been a little bit of the Wild West because it's not one market, right? Whether it's
entertainment in, the Hollywood or kind of the Santa Monica or Orange County or, some of the stuff that's going on up in Santa Barbara. It's very geographically dispersed, but also because it is, you don't have that same core.
Right.
When you were looking at this, where did you see the greatest pain?
I've been lucky enough to mostly live and work in Santa Monica.
Yeah.
I think it's a great place for the last 20-something years. So it's been a happy coincidence that Santa Monica, Venice, the west side has turned into the kind of center of gravity, and I'm sure I'll piss some people off by saying this, but the quote Silicon Beach or the west side has there's been critical mass. So it's been easier to locate an office there, my initial office in Santa Monica, and have people basically emanating from, a West Side office.
Yeah.
To be able to, our model involves a lot of on-premises, in-house, face-to-face work, and that model works better if you have some geographic density.
Yeah.
And we do in Santa Monica. LA has been for the last 10 years a stronger early stage market than a later stage market in terms of venture-backed companies, and we focus on that. We focus on Series Seed through Series B, so that has also lent itself to rapid growth in our business.
Yeah, I'm fascinated how you guys decided on, you were going to build a company for this niche market, right? Because I think, it's interesting when you take your BeachMint story about starting too many brands. When you did your own company, you're like, okay, I'm going to pick this discrete area to start with. And obviously you guys have grown over the years, and we'll talk about sort of the, merging the business, but you didn't make that mistake twice. You were very defined, it looks like.
It was very defined, and it was also what I knew best.
Yeah.
And what I'd love to do, masochism or not.
So when you think about now that you've been running this for, 5-6 years, when you look back, what surprised you the most when you started?
I think it was really the volume. I mean, how many companies are out there, great companies are out there that you maybe never heard of, that have funding, serial founders, need the same help. And I think I of course, being a finance guy, built a business plan, before I started it to make sure it all made sense to me and to others. And I don't ever recall getting to hundreds of clients in this short a time.
Yeah.
And the other thing that's been nice is we spend less than 1% of our revenues on any kind of marketing, biz dev, sponsorships, what have you. It is a word of mouth, referral, networking business. And my now partner and I have both been in this community for decades, and so that helps a great deal. But as Warren Buffett says, it takes 20 years to build a reputation, 5 minutes to lose it. And so we want our work to be our best advertising. Yeah. And being maniacal about that and very focused on that as founders has been a lesson, not just because we care, just we're wired that way as service providers, but it makes business sense as well.
Yeah, and I think a lot of companies, you've seen it, have made that mistake of overexpansion too quickly, and
right. Service levels and quality levels decline rapidly.
Yeah, and we'll talk about some of your advice a little bit later, which you'll give to companies, but it definitely feels like you've tried to take your 10 software or your 10 startup experiences and put it into your own DNA and not making that mistake twice.
I think that's right.
Yeah.
I think, right now we're in a recurring revenue business, even though we don't necessarily model it out that way. And obviously, the lower my churn is and the longer clients stay with us, the better. On the other hand, similar to Match or eHarmony or any of the other services putting people together, the better job you do help supporting these companies, just like the better job they do putting couples together.
Yeah.
Those people will churn, right? My clients will get great funding and hire full-time people. Match.com's or maybe more eHarmony's clients will get married.
Yeah, that's funny.
And drop off. So there's a little bit of push-pull there.
I like that. One of the interesting things, and this is I've known and seen you obviously in the community and do this for years, But you made the decision to merge with, I don't want to maybe a competitor, but one of the other companies that was doing a similar thing in this market. How did that come about?
I was 9 people, and in the course of maybe 2 weeks, 3 of my people gave me the information that they were pregnant and would be out on maternity leave, which I fully support. On the other hand, I was losing 33% of my workforce almost all at the same time. And I realized that scale mattered.
Yeah.
And so I started talking to everyone who had talked to me about this, about who was good in my world and in my business among my competitors. And it was pretty clear that Ivan, my now partner, and his business was thought of very highly by the community and by current clients and former clients. And so he and I started a conversation, and it felt very natural, felt very good. We were competitors. We knew each other a little bit. And I think it was 2 sushi dinners, a breakfast, and a meeting later, and we had a merger agreement ready to go. So I guess he's kind of a cheap date. And,
or you're the cheap date.
I'm the cheap date. And we, businesses as big as Oracle and NetSuite, or Fortune 500 businesses merge, or as small as us merge. It comes down to people, and do you have an integration plan? Do you have a way to get people who were previously competitors to work together? And for us, we did. We had 2 lucky things. One, he and I are very compatible as partners, and it has been a fantastic partnership. And 2, our 2 workforces actually dovetailed really nicely in terms of seniority and functions, and we put that on paper, saw that immediately. We couldn't know about the partner chemistry, but the workforces and integrating those and having them work together and transition to a merged entity was incredibly smooth. And
did either of you take venture-backed money?
No.
Okay, so these are all bootstrap businesses then, right?
Yep. No, we Silicon Valley Bank's been very supportive, provided some working capital for the merged business, and otherwise it's a bootstrap business.
Yeah, I think it's interesting just for the audience, because there's a lot of the customers you're serving are obviously venture backed and have huge growth rate expectations on them. But I think the majority of businesses actually don't raise VC money, right? It's either a family business or it's
the majority of our clients are venture backed.
Yeah, you deal with the venture backed crowd, but I think for those who are maybe doing a bootstrapping like yourself as well, it's an interesting experience to hear how you scaled up without raising external capital.
Sure. And it's a lot of the same pressures that every business faces, is that your customers pay you slowly and your employees need to get paid
on time.
And it's the biggest stress is working capital.
I want to talk about your org structure too. So you're just self-described and you're co-managing partner. So you guys are equals in terms of running the business?
We're equals. We added a 3rd partner recently. Okay. A guy named Rick Gombos from OpenX, among other places, and that's been fantastic. That just gives us that much more firepower at the top, as well as management bandwidth. And we all share the load in terms of new business, both receiving the inbounds as well as doing the close process, if there is one. We all help manage clients. Some directly as CFO of that client, and some just making sure that everything's going well. We've recently added a director of operations position, our first non-revenue producing position, to make sure that clients are onboarded well, that we're institutionalizing our processes, and we'll probably add more operational and non-revenue producing positions as we grow. We have an HR services division now. A woman that I used to work with named Maureen Chung, who runs that and is part of the management team, and that's been new in the last year or so. And then we have a structure where we have more senior people, controllers and accounting managers, mentoring and managing the staff accountants and senior accountants, and so weekly or monthly check-ins, meetings, even if they're not on all their clients together, to help make sure that people are learning and growing, and that their problems are getting solved that don't always need to be solved by the partners.
Yeah, we're gonna dive in a little bit some of your lessons and best practices, but I think what's fascinating to me is how you're layering your growth. Right, you didn't raise venture capital money, you merged to get scale, and yet you're still finding new ways to layer growth incrementally with new, effectively, practices like moving into HR. I'm still drawn by how it ties back to some of your other experiences where you've seen folks make those mistakes. So we're going to take a quick break and dive into some of your lessons in scaling a business.
Want to help save the planet? Here's an idea. Go nude. Unfortunately, not wearing clothes isn't realistic for most of us, but buying sustainable clothing is. Here's Gordon Seabury, CEO of Toad & Co.
Few know that garment production can generate tremendous pollution. So that's why we're hellbent on offering cleaner, sustainably made clothing that's stylish and long-lasting. But that's only half the battle at Toad & Co. When it comes to hitting our business goals, we've learned to focus on what we're good at and seek partners for other areas of expertise. So when it came to ensuring a consistent customer experience across all sales channels and knowing what was going on with all aspects of our business, we chose NetSuite by Oracle. They know business systems, we know eco-friendly clothes. A perfect match.
From accounting and finance to commerce and human resources, NetSuite is the #1 business system to help you simply manage your business. Right now, go to netsuite.com/toad to get your free guide, Crushing the 5 Barriers to Growth. That's netsuite.com/toad for your free guide and to hear Gordon bear all on Toad & Co.'s growth story.
All right, we're back and we're going to talk a little bit about some of the lessons that you've learned from your companies you worked at, from your obviously your customers and your own experience, but this notion of how you layer and stage and build incrementally from your hub, even though you're not venture backed, I think is one of the core lessons that a lot of people struggle with getting right. So when you set out to design your plan and you talked about you didn't expect this many customers, how did you plan for that growth? Like what were some of the things that you did to make sure that you didn't overextend but also weren't too conservative?
I think whether you're venture-backed, bootstrapped, bank-funded, people lose sight of the cash flow. They look at their P&L or they look at their balance sheet and forget about their cash flow statement and don't project out how growth will impact their cash position. And that's something we try to practice what we preach. You know, we do this for our clients, but we also do this for ourselves because I can hire 10 new people to service clients. Those clients probably are not paying me. They're not even getting billed for 30 days, let alone paying me maybe for another 30 after that. So I could go broke by growing quickly, as could many businesses that are buying goods from China where they're paying up front or paying 50% up front and not getting paid by their customers until 90, 120, 180 days later. So cash is king, and especially when you're not venture backed and you don't have deep bank accounts backing you up. So that's one of the lessons I've learned in every business, but particularly ours that is not venture backed, and I think would be, it is the number one, I joke, the number one reason companies go out of business, but it's also the number one mistake that founders make is they don't understand the difference between what could be an accrual based, a GAAP financial income statement, and actually cash flow.
Yeah, no, it's interesting that's. What are some of the other things that you see founders making mistakes on when they start, whether they're VC backed or non VC backed?
I think drinking your Kool-Aid, eating your own dog food, overly optimistic planning that leads you into it's a dilemma. It's a catch-22, right? You sometimes want to believe all the optimistic plans so that you work those 100-hour weeks, so that your people do, so that you raise money on it, and then you may spend money as if your sales are going to achieve those plans, and they usually don't. Yeah. Certainly, early stage businesses almost always miss their plans, and again, venture backed or not, and so having a conservative version and. Back to BeachMint, one of the lessons learned there. We did not have a defined, written down, agreed upon measure for when we would kill a vertical, when we would stop doing a business. And I think, had we had that, we may have conserved a lot of capital by saying this just isn't right. Let's either pause it, kill it, or tweak it. And entrepreneurs can learn that, like, if you're not hitting certain milestones by such and such a time or such and such a cash balance, take difficult action. Preserve your runway. It's all about how long you can live. And so,
do you find companies though in still making, maybe not being brutal enough or honest enough with themselves early on?
Sure.
And still kind of going down that path
Sure.
of
hope springs eternal.
Yeah.
Gamblers. Most startup founders are gamblers, right?
Yeah.
You can always win it back.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's a huge mistake, is these over-optimistic planning visions that if they go right, great. But generally in the first 2 or 3 years of a company, you do not achieve those things.
Yeah. You got to preserve to fight another day. And
stuff happens.
Yeah.
Right. And then if you can get profitable, and know when you can get profitable, because once you achieve profitability, you have a lot of optionality. You can do a lot of things. As long as you're losing money on a cash and P&L basis, your hands are more tied.
Yeah. What's the step that an entrepreneur can do to sort of make sure that they have that check and balance in their, not just in writing a business plan, but just in the organization? How do you avoid getting
hiring a CFO is a good plan, part-time or full-time, because CFOs tend to be more conservative and more pessimistic. Often balances out to a realistic viewpoint. If you don't want to do that, or you can't do that, try to find advisors or board members or investors who can also be your reality check and your gut check. Because you can be in your own little echo chamber and right down to zero.
When you look at, like, and we can talk about BeachMint or other companies if you want generically, but did you find the org structures in place where you just didn't have sort of, if you got multiple founders, them not agreeing upon what those, I don't want to call them KPIs or key performance indicators or metrics, but not understanding the mechanics of the business model, so that they didn't know when they were in that yellow line? Or
I don't think BeachMint was full of very smart people, founders and otherwise. So we understood a lot of those. I think I've been lucky enough to be at companies with mostly very smart founding teams, and so understanding the numbers and understanding the strategy and the KPIs was not usually a problem. Other problems, as we've talked about.
Yeah.
But I was at a company called Total Beauty, great founder, CEO, Emra. We got mowed down by programmatic advertising, as did so many advertising-based businesses at the time. That wasn't a matter of not knowing KPIs.
It was a structural thing.
Yeah, it was just a overall market structural.
Yeah, I'm curious, in some instances when things go too far with like a losing strategy or a losing hand, do you find people in disagreement over, hey, well, that we're gonna make it up and to get it back, like you said? How do you make sure that you keep those teams in sync in terms of the realistic?
Sometimes the teams that succeed in a direct selling advertising world don't succeed and shouldn't be the same team for a programmatic advertising world. Ask the music label executives.
Yeah.
Things, industries change and change quickly. And sometimes people are just stuck. I'm not saying this was the case with Total Beauty, but maybe more so with music labels. People are stuck in their ways and see the world in a certain way. When the world changes around them,
have a hard time evolving to it. I want to ask you a question a little bit on state of financing right now, and for companies that are maybe raising money. There was a talk 4 or 5 years ago about the Series B crunch, folks getting their seed in the year A and not being able to raise their B. Maybe, obviously you've got a lot of experience in Southern California, but maybe more generically, what do you see right now in terms of that next B and C round? Is it as easy to get as it was 3 years ago? Is it harder?
We're going to see a lot of carnage and companies trying to get a B. I don't see them much beyond that.
Yeah.
But I think there's a lot of companies that were raised Series Seed and probably seed extensions, got to the point where they had good enough traction to get that A done. I think the A crunch has loosened a bit, and now we're seeing that B crunch. And I think there's going to be a decent amount of carnage. It doesn't make the headlines that major Series C, D companies going out of business make. But I think you'll see that Series B investors are picky. They want specific metrics and a lot of traction. And I don't know that that's going to be there. The top of the funnel, the Series Seed, and even Series A, top of the funnel has gotten wider and wider, as you can see in some of the statistics. And I don't know that Series B financings have increased in number that much, enough to support that.
Yeah. Do you feel like the failure rate that we see right now in the startup world, it doesn't feel that bad out there? It feels like you don't see companies, going out of business in mass on the startup venture side.
I think there are more happening than you see or hear about. We see them up close. Even then, I've been pleased. I think my original business plan had triple the number of our clients going out of business than is actually happening. And some of that's just selection bias. Some of that's just things are better, but I think it will increase. I see. I don't know.
Do you think founders are still too focused on premium and high valuations when they do these rounds? Is that part of the issue, or do you think it's just lack of business model traction? Is there, you can kind of look at it two ways. One is like the business just isn't going to work, and those are shut down. But you hear stories about, bid-ask spread. The company wants X, which is much higher than maybe that picky Series B investor.
Right.
Is that still a point of friction now?
I think that's a big point of friction in Series B. It's lessened in Series A, and it's not. Series Seed, I think there's still crazy stuff going on.
Yeah, that one's a little interesting because you see it even in some of the public markets, right, where even the high-profile IPOs are going out at valuations that are materially less than, say, the last Series E or F round or the last, the growth expansion.
But the financing structures have protection for late-stage investors against that.
Yeah. But you're seeing
you're seeing that's an inverted yield curve kind of situation.
It's kind of wacky. Yeah, the public markets are not paying what the late-stage privates were paying. Yep. And I'm curious, but it all starts in sort of that BC range where you see some pretty frothy valuations, which you almost can't justify by any stretch unless they become a home run.
Bird scooters, for example.
I'm just worried about. I don't know about Bird's valuation. I'm just worried about all those kids riding around Venice without helmets on. It's a parent in me now.
It is.
That's maybe the biggest risk.
I think that inverted yield curve, as I call it, you see, financing structures that protect an investor. The last money in on the private side, so that it's almost expected, it's almost built in, it's almost a norm these days.
So what's your advice then for some of these A round type of companies? Is it get to profitability as fast as you can, or is it to raise money sooner? How do you manage this?
You want to get traction. No matter what, get traction, but you don't want to buy it at insane prices of customer acquisition. But every investor I talk to for a Series B round wants to see, real traction, not just arbitrage.
Yeah.
And something. There's a real believable window on profitability, not just Excel made up window. And I think. You gotta know your business. You gotta, again, inputs and outputs.
Yeah. You merged your company with a competitor. Do you think you're going to see that trend play out in some of these other markets where maybe there's too much Series A or seed funding?
And unfortunately, founders often get crushed in that.
The
institutional investors figure out a way to make up some of their losses and common. I advise founders all the time: don't take a crazy seed valuation or sometimes a Series A valuation, because down rounds really hurt.
That's a fast down round if you go from seed to A. That's frightening.
But I've seen, and seed extensions at a lot of founders, they're first-time founders and don't necessarily understand what happens in a down round in terms of the anti-dilution ratchets kicking in, and that common takes all the beating in a down round.
Yeah.
And so be careful what you wish for on your valuation.
Yeah. To kind of wrap up, when you think about what are the one or two things that founders and CEOs, he or she, what do they need to do to make sure they kind of get that next round in place? I mean, is it from sort of your business model and, you know, what you advise people on in terms of your finances and how you manage your cash flow?
I think you need to talk to a lot of investors all the time if you're planning on raising institutional money.
Yeah.
Because despite what people think, they don't all have the same opinion of what they will invest in the next round. And you could talk to 20 different VCs about your Series A and get 10 different very clear answers on what they want to see. And you have to decide what you can achieve, what you want to achieve. Is this a lifestyle business? Is this an IPO business? Is this something in between? Because there are certain businesses that are just never going to go public.
Yeah.
We're never going to go public. We're a services business. We may have some technology components to it, but it's never going to be, we're not going to be Oracle.
So make sure you have those. It sounds like you really do need to have continuous conversations with existing investors and prospective. It's almost like building your own customer acquisition funnel. Make sure you've got folks that you're talking to and bringing them into the fold.
And be prepared to reinvent yourself. If you talk to the founders of so many successful businesses, the PayPals of the world, and what they became was not what they set out to do. So have an open mind. Again, talk to investors, talk to very smart people, talk to fellow entrepreneurs, and think about what you could become. I spoke to a company this morning that's very services focused, who's moving to a software platform business model because the first one has terrible gross margins and they're never going to get profitable on it.
You in your own business, how are you thinking about your next phase of growth over the next couple of years? If you bring it back to running full stack.
Right. I think LA still has significant growth ahead of it. I mean, it's grown so much in the last 10, 20 years, but so we'll continue to grow with LA. We are starting to add more adjacent businesses, the HR services, that we're thinking about what those could be. And there are some industry focuses, I think, very interestingly, the cannabis and the CBD, not just the THC, but the CBD business both those businesses are booming in a now legal California. There's clearly some federal banking and credit card processing hurdles, but still industry focuses like that are not just VC-backed tech-related businesses. For us, it's something that we're currently at a partner level discussing, and then moving geographically. I think this business model can easily be taken not to Silicon Valley per our previous conversation, but to other, as you call them, newer markets. The Seattles, the Portlands, the Denvers, the Boulders, Austins of the world, and that's something that's currently under active consideration as well.
Well, this has been great. It's fascinating for me to hear all your stories about what you saw, but I think even how you've grown your own business is sort of a story in itself, and I think a lot of entrepreneurs can learn from how do you manage your cash flow and think incrementally and layer your growth strategy in so you don't get ahead of yourself and keep the ball moving forward in a rational and profitable way. So it's good stuff.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Well, everybody, Jodan Posell, thanks for coming in, man. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Thank you so much to Jodan Posell for coming on this episode of the GrowWire podcast. I also want to shout out to everyone who made it possible, our sponsors over at Ring and Toad & Co., as well as our editing crew over at Lampstand. Adios.
You just listened to the GrowWire podcast with host Jason Maynard. Make sure to tune in every week for another episode full of tips, tools, and strategies to take your personal and professional growth to the next level. Until next time.